Thanks to a good friend, I acquired a really big vice. And it's bigger than what it looks in this video. It's really heavy. It's had a fair bit of use. It's a Parkinsons vice dating back to 1880, but it was made anywhere between 1880 to 1930. In this video, I'm just going to strip it down and give it a refresh. I'm not going to completely tart it up, just to make it good and usable. Weirdly on this, all of the screws and bolts came off quite easily. I'm guessing it's possibly been rebuilt in the past. But yeah, no need for any WD-40 or anything like that. Everything just came off as it should, which is really weird. I didn't need to replace anything on this. Everything was just stripped down, cleaned up, painted, and then put back together again. It has an automatic slide feature where you just press this handle in and out, and then it allows the jaws to open and close without having to constantly turn the handle. It's hard to explain how it works. Basically, it has a slide mechanism at the bottom, which you can just about see here, and when you pull the handle, it turns it, which pulls down like an engagement nut, a really long engagement nut, which you can't see yet, to disengage it from the worm gear. That's the big one. Once the worm gear's out, the whole thing can slide out, and then we're left with our two main assemblies, or castings, and inside the base casting you can just about make out the weird nut. Oh, that washer there, if you lose that, then you're in trouble. That's to stop the vice from opening too far and having it fall on your feet. So that's the nut which moves up and down with the slider. This little part that I'm taking off now is this little retainer that keeps the slider from falling out, which I sort of forget about when I put it back together again.
I'll do this.
Once all the parts are disassembled, it's time to get rid of any large chunks of grease and any other large stains that needed to come off before the wire wheel. I find if you don't do this beforehand, then the wire wheel sort of forces the oil almost into the metal, and it makes it more difficult to degrease later. So I do one before and then one after. But thankfully it was already in pretty good condition, so it didn't take long to do this process. I'm fortunate enough to have quite a large ultrasonic bath which has a heater built in as well, and this is really useful for getting into the places that you just can't reach otherwise. You can even set a timer so you can just walk away from it and it will switch itself off when it's done. It was really difficult to get this to fit. I couldn't fit the other part of the casting, the long casting. It's only the main base casting that would fit, and of course the smaller components as well.
bollocks.
Unfortunately, when you switch it on, it's incredibly noisy, and so there will be a bit of background noise as I continue with the rebuild. So the ultrasonic bath's switched on now, and you can still hear it as I'm grinding away at the sliding jaw of the vise. I sped it up 10 times because there's no point in sitting here for an hour watching me grind away at a piece of metal. This one's just come out of the ultrasonic bath and it's still a little bit damp, but the heat of the day and the heat of the ultrasonic bath, it dries off really quickly. Then it was straight onto it again with a wire wheel on the angle grinder. When doing this kind of thing, it's really important to have a really strong base or workbench. This thing must be 50-60 kilos when it's fully assembled. It is very heavy. I've got a trellis that it's sitting on which can take nearly half a ton, so it shouldn't fall on my foot. Once you've done all the grinding, then you've got a mask everywhere that you don't want paint to go on. So here I use really cheap nasty masking tape which takes forever to take back off again, but it's all I have. And when I take off the excess masking, I use the back of a craft knife, scraping backwards, and it gives me a perfect profile of whatever it is that I'm covering. Next up, I'm painting it in the Halford's primer. It's an enamel primer, which is the same as what I used on my saw that I restored in a previous video. Here I'm using my little rotating base, like a Lazy Susan thing, made out of a car bearing so it can handle the weight. I did 2 coats of primer, let it cure for a day, and then the next day I coated it with another 2 coats of Halford's enamel gloss black, and then I let that dry for another 2 days. Once the paint was on, I decided it might be a good idea to give a nice bright coat to the lettering in the castings. The castings on this aren't brilliant, so it came out okay. I'm quite pleased with it, but it would have been a lot better if the casting was of slightly better quality on the raised lettering. So after another couple of days of drying, because that was like an acrylic paint, it seemed to take forever to dry, I then went over it with 2 coats of 2-pack clear coat. You must wear a mask when you're using this because it's quite nasty stuff, but it's really, really good quality. And it gives a nice shine to it. The last vice I rebuilt, I didn't put a clear coat on, and the paint was ruined pretty quickly. So this time round, I thought I'll put a clear coat on and see how it fares. On to the last of the components now. I'm just using a wire brush in my bench grinder just to get rid of any bits of surface rust or crud. Yeah, quite straightforward. Good tool to use. It gives quite a nice shine to the handle and the components that you can see. The other components I just gave them a wipe and made sure that there was no rust on them. The handle was particularly difficult just because it keeps moving all the time. I did what I could with it. I've seen a lot of other videos where people make them really, really shiny, but again, I'm going to be using this vise, so I didn't feel the need to spend hours making it look too tarty, but I wanted it to look nice all the same. Here's all the components all finished up, ready to be assembled. I think it looks pretty nice. The lettering came out pretty well. I had to wait 2 days for the clear coat to harden. It's still not quite fully hardened, but it's enough for me to handle the vise and put it back together again. It took me a while to work out how to put the moving lock nut in. I thought it went through the top, but it doesn't. You have to put it in through the bottom. I spent a good 10 minutes trying to get it in. Obviously, thanks to the joys of video editing, you don't have to wait that long. Looking into the throat of the vice base, you just have to get the nut just in the right location. Otherwise, you can't close the vice when you put the other side on. It's important to make sure you grease the slide rails as well. There's 2 at the front, the longer ones, and 2 short ones at the back. If you don't do this, it's just going to wear out faster. I'm getting away with the camera a bit here trying to assemble this, but there wasn't much I can do about it. It was a bit of a pig to get it in, but once it was in, then it was fine. Again, it was the nut was in the way, and you just have to get it all at the right angle to make it work. This washer, if you forget to put it in, as I said earlier, the sliding part of the vise will just fall straight out. So it's important to put the washer in so it can lock itself in place when it's fully open. I forgot which way around it's supposed to go and how it goes in. Luckily, I worked it out in the end. Make sure you lube everything up, otherwise it's just going to wear out quicker and become more and more difficult to use. Pretty much everything that moves was given a decent amount of grease. I'm just using normal bearing grease that you'd use on a car. Here I didn't know it, but when you put it in, that little washer, well, that big washer that we saw earlier needs to go in around about now, before it engages in the small hole at the back. But I didn't know that, so it takes me a while to figure it out. It has a kind of weird ratchet mechanism on it, so you can adjust the tension in the spring. too loose and it's just going to be flapping around all over the place and it's not really going to work, and too tight and it will wear out really quickly. So you just need to get it sort of at a sweet spot. It took me a couple of attempts to do this because although I've done one once before, it was quite a long time ago, and I forgot which way round things are supposed to go. You can see that the nut engages with the spring. Then when you put the slider on, you tighten the nut, and you can see there's sort of like works sort of like a cam. There's raised portions on the nut, so as you tighten it, it clicks and doesn't allow itself to unwind. It's a ratchet mechanism, that's what I meant to say. Out of the whole thing, this is probably the most, not boring, but certainly the most difficult part, because it took a bit of trial and error, which you don't see in the video, but I spent a good half an hour on this just trying to get the tension right in the spring. But once it's there, and put it back in.
Oh, come on. That's right.
If I'd have known better, which I do now, then I would have known to remove the screw entirely and put them both in together at the same time, and then when it's halfway in, put the washer in. But here I haven't put in a little locking tab that stops the slider from falling. It takes me a few minutes to figure that out.
I've forgotten something.
Once I realise, I just stick it on its side, trying desperately not to damage the soft-ish paint. And just as it goes over, you'll be able to see the sliders the wrong way around. It's about 90 degrees out, and that's because it hasn't got the locking tab in. And again, I make another mistake here. I put the locking tab in whilst the slider is still in there. You can do it, but it's awkward. So I'll try to put it in now. Doesn't go. So the only way you can do it is either take it out, redo it again with it in situ, or take the whole slider assembly out. In this instance, I just opted to turn the slider and then screw the tab down and hope it stays, which it did. And then there's that pesky washer again. You just have to find the right spot, and then once it's in, and then that's it. Bastard. So yeah, the washer fell out again. Here I'm adjusting the ratchet nut because the tension, once it was assembled and put together, the tension didn't feel right. So I just gave it a slight adjustment again, just before I screwed the assembly back into the vise. So I'm now putting on the jaws of the vise. I didn't choose to replace these because they seem perfectly fine for my needs. Yeah, so I had to be really careful when tightening the nuts. I didn't completely damage the paint, but it came out okay. And that's the completed article, all finished. Just going to let it sit for a few days, let the paint fully harden, and then I'll find a bench strong enough to support it, as it bends my current bench, so I need to build a new one. Thanks for watching, and I hope you liked the video. And if you plan on doing a project like that, then hopefully this will give you some idea on how to do it. Yeah, like and subscribe.